and say, hey, what happens if you do get into a chain? What happens if you do get a Costco buy or whatever, and you're going to be in our market? And usually what I ask is, give me 6 months. Before you go knocking on those doors, let me know, give me 6 months on it, so I can exit out of my position on this wine before I start looking like a fool by having these elevated margins on the same product, right?
Hey guys, this is Sid Patel, CEO of Beverage Trade Network and USATT Trade Tasting. We are day 2 in Chicago at the 7th annual USATT Trade Tasting. I have Bruce here, who's the head buyer for wine and spirits, right?
Yeah.
For wine and spirits at Brown Jug Alaska, 23 stores in Alaska. And we're going to talk about something very different here, exclusive labels, how to get control labels, purchase orders, or how buyers usually go about that, right? When do they start looking for something that they need? Bruce, thanks for joining me here.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about, how do you create this program and what kind of quantities you work and how do you find suppliers?
For sure. So this program kind of came out of a need for us being a small, when it comes to other states, comparatively small retailer, right? So we found that meeting minimums for typical control label, typical private label programs was very difficult for us because we just couldn't hit the 1,000 case, 2,000 case minimums that a lot of these programs require for you to carry these wines in your stores. But we still wanted that point of difference, these exclusive labels in our stores. So what I started doing is I started reaching out to boutique wineries, boutique distilleries across the country that didn't have distribution of their own and said, hey, I would love to carry your product in Alaska as an exclusive. And the way that works is we have a distributor brokered in for us, so we make sure that we mind our P's and Q's when it comes to the 3-tier system. And we can bring these products in that become exclusive for us because we're brokering them and the distributor isn't carrying them normally. We get them at a better price, which means we can make control label margins on a brand that is I hate to say, but a real winery made by real people as a really quality product.
So just on double clicking on that, you mean it's not available in your state, or generally it's just not, they don't choose distribution as a strategy and it's just a cellar door kind of thing?
They're usually too small to choose distribution.
Perfect. So then that way you don't have to worry about the whole thing who's selling in the country.
Exactly, yeah. So, but if we can get on the ground floor and be like, hey, I know that you're too small to distribute, but if I can take, 10% of your production, that's right-sized for us, it's right-sized for you. We get an exclusive brand in the market. You get these guaranteed sales every year. And again, because of the way that we bring it into market, we can then make a very rich margin on it, just as if we were using a typical standard control brand.
So let's say in this case, what I'm imagining is suppliers don't have to really discount. They can just sell you at the normal proper cost. It's just you are marking up high because there is nowhere else, right?
Yeah, and it's a combination of two things. It's one, there's no competition in the market, so there's no price comparison, right? So, but we still want to offer a good deal for consumers as well. We never want to get to the point where it's no longer great QPR. So the way that it's brokered in, though, the distributor, they don't have to do anything with it, right? They don't have to stock it in their warehouse. They don't have to market it. They don't have to expend sales team resources on it, which means that the margin that they're charging us on it is much, much smaller. And then we can take some of that for ourselves and pass the rest on to our consumers. So it usually still winds up being an attractive price to the consumer, but we're making upwards of 40, 45 points on it.
Understood. So what are the locking periods? For example, let's say, today I'm fine with this, but tomorrow I decide to start distribution, and Bruce has been my loyal customer, he's been buying, he's actually made my brand, and I'm just knocking the next door state now because in Alaska it's famous. Do you just bind them in contracts, or do you prefer an open contract?
We prefer it to be open and just more relationship based. So, and if they go to other states, because I'm a regional chain, it doesn't hurt me at all, right? So, and Alaska is usually the last place that people go for distribution. So most of the time, it's not something that I have to worry about it unless that brand becomes very, very big. And that's going to take, years down the road usually for it to get to that point. So if, say, I'm using a boutique winery out of California, they're going to usually self-distribute California first, and then they're going to go to a regional distributor. Then they may go into the Oregon or the Washington market or the Nevada market. But Alaska usually is 2 or 3 steps down the line. So for the most part, that doesn't affect us that much. Honestly, the other thing that we've done, and I encourage other regional chains to do, is go to some of these wineries that they are in distribution in their state and say, hey, the distributor is not doing you any favors with the way that they're representing your brand. Stop going through them. Go through us exclusively, and we'll sell more cases of your product as a priority in our stores than you were going full market with the distributor. And we've done that with several brands where we have actually taken that brand and made it and doubled, tripled, quadrupled their sales on that brand by making it priority in our stores, just in our chain, compared to what the distributor was doing with it chain-wide for years.
If it's on your chain, is it okay if I knock restaurants, or
100%?
It's a complementary thing?
Exactly, yeah. It only is good for us if it's out in restaurants as well. If you still want to sell to restaurants either through the distributor or in our market, in a lot of other markets, licensee to licensee sales are legal. So we'll actually sell some of these brands from our stores at a reduced margin. So it's still attractive to restaurants. The restaurants actually buy from us as well.
Usually, there must be a minimum sort of expectation, right? At least a 5,000 case production who can do this kind of things, or?
We do it in much, much smaller quantities. It can be that large,
depends
right?
on the offering,
Depends on
right?
the offering, right? But we also, bring in some items where production on the item will be 70 cases for certain items, and we'll take 25% of their total production on that particular product because it becomes a selling point for us. We can say only 70 cases of this was made. We have 25% of everything that was made from this vintage up here in Alaska. You're not going to see this anywhere else except for the winery, and it becomes a feather in a cap. Certainly, we're not going to do volume on those items because there's not room to do volumes, but I don't look at a small scale to be a barrier there. We can do, pallet orders and multiple pallet orders on the wines that make sense for it, but we can also do much smaller volumes when it's going to make sense and be a selling point for us.
Cool. One question comes to my mind is, let's say I start with that route, and then I'm also knocking doors of Kroger's and, let's say, big chains, and I finally get there. Is there a way we can talk about buyouts? Say, okay, Bruce, thanks for building in Alaska. Here's what you've done. How does that work?
For sure, and that's a really good point, because that's a conversation that I usually like to have with the supplier, with the winery, with the distillery, and say, hey, what happens if you do get into a chain? What happens if you do get a Costco buy or whatever, and you're going to be in our market? And usually what I ask is, give me 6 months. Before you go knocking on those doors, let me know, give me 6 months on it, so I can exit out of my position on this wine before I start looking like a fool by having these elevated margins on the same product, right? So you absolutely do need an exit strategy, especially for the larger suppliers.
Correct.
For the boutique suppliers, they're never going to be big enough to get into a big chain like that anyway, and you can operate with a little bit more impunity that way.